Single dad Marcus works 2 jobs to feed his daughter Sophie. His life is hard and lonely. Then he meets Sarah, a brave SWAT officer. They fall in love. But one day, Sarah gets shot twice during a dangerous mission. Marcus does something nobody expects. He runs into danger and takes a bullet to save her life. And becomes a hero overnight. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Marcus had seen better days. Much better days. There was a time in his life when he wore a suit to work, when he had a steady paycheck, when he didn't have to worry about how he would pay the bills. But that was before his wife left. That was before he became a single father to a beautiful little girl named Sophie. Sophie was 6 years old. She had blonde hair like her mother and brown eyes like Marcus. Every morning, Marcus would wake up, look at his daughter sleeping peacefully in her small bedroom, and wonder how he had become the man who was responsible for everything. The rent, the food, the clothes, the school fees. Everything fell on his shoulders. The apartment they lived in was small and worn down. The walls had cracks in them. The kitchen sink dripped constantly, and Marcus had to put a bucket underneath to catch the water. The heating system was broken, and in winter, they had to use space heaters to stay warm. But it was their home, and Marcus worked hard to keep it clean and safe for Sophie. Marcus's wife, Jennifer, had left when Sophie was just 2 years old. She had said that motherhood was not for her. She had said that she felt trapped and suffocated. She had said that she wanted to pursue her dreams, and having a child was preventing her from doing that. Marcus had begged her to stay, had told her that they could work through it together, but Jennifer had made up her mind. She had packed a bag, kissed Sophie goodbye, and walked out the door. She had not sent a single email or a phone call since. She had simply disappeared from their lives. At first, Marcus had been devastated. He had felt like a failure as a husband and as a man. But then he had looked at Sophie, at her innocent little face, and he had realized that failure was not an option. He had to be strong. He had to keep going. He had to give Sophie the best life he possibly could, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. Marcus had worked hard to build a life for them. He had learned how to cook simple meals that were nutritious and cheap. He had learned how to fix things around the apartment instead of calling a repairman. He had learned how to be both mother and father to his daughter. It was not easy, but he did it because he loved her more than life itself. Marcus worked 2 jobs. During the day, he worked at a construction site. At night, he worked as a security guard at a warehouse. The pay was not good, but it was enough to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. What it was not enough for was time. Marcus barely had time to spend with his daughter. He would drop her off at school in the morning, work all day, pick her up in the afternoon, spend an hour with her before bed, and then leave for his night job. He would come home at midnight or 1 in the morning, and Sophie would already be asleep. The construction work was hard on his body. His back ached constantly. His hands were covered with calluses and small cuts. His muscles were always sore. But Marcus never complained. He would wake up in the morning and do it all over again because he had to. Because Sophie depended on him. Because love was the most powerful force in the world, and love made you do things that seemed impossible. The night job at the warehouse was different. It was quieter and less physically demanding, but it was lonely. Marcus would walk through the empty warehouse all night, making sure that nothing was being stolen, checking doors and locks, making his rounds. Sometimes he would think about Jennifer and wonder if she was happy. Sometimes he would think about Sophie and wonder what she was dreaming about. Most of the time, he would just keep walking and keep working. On the days when Marcus didn't have the night job, he would sit with Sophie on the small porch of their apartment and they would talk. Sophie would tell him about her day at school. She would tell him about her friends, about what she learned, about her dreams of becoming a police officer like the one she saw at the school assembly. Marcus would listen to every word, and his heart would break because he knew he was not giving her what she deserved. He was not giving her a full childhood. He was not giving her both parents. He was only giving her one tired father who was doing the best he could. One day, at the construction site, Marcus was working on a building when he heard a commotion. There was an accident. Another worker had fallen from a height. Marcus rushed over to help. He stayed with the injured man until the ambulance came. He gave his statement to the police. He did everything right. But when the company investigated the accident, they discovered that Marcus had been working without proper safety equipment. It was not Marcus's fault. The company had not provided it. But the company blamed Marcus anyway. They said he had been negligent. They said he had put other workers in danger. They fired him. Marcus felt a deep sense of injustice at being blamed for something that was not his fault. But he also felt relief. He was tired of the heavy physical work. His body was breaking down. Maybe this was a sign that something better was coming. Or maybe it was just life being cruel to him again. He did not know which one it was, but he soon found out. Marcus walked out of that construction site with nothing but the clothes on his back and a deep sense of fear in his heart. He had lost his primary income. He still had the night job at the warehouse, but that was not enough. That was never going to be enough. He had bills to pay. He had a child to feed. He had dreams that seemed to be slipping away with every passing day. That night, Marcus sat in his small apartment and looked at his bills. Rent was due in 10 days. Sophie's school fees were due in 2 weeks. There was barely any food in the refrigerator. Marcus put his head in his hands and felt the weight of the world crushing down on him. Sophie came out of her room in her pajamas. She was holding her teddy bear, the one that Marcus had bought for her when she was born. "Daddy, I'm thirsty," Sophie said, her little voice cutting through the silence. Marcus wiped his face quickly and stood up. "Of course, baby," he said. "Let me get you some water." He poured a glass of water for his daughter. As he watched her drink, he made a silent promise to himself. He would find another job. He would work harder. He would do whatever it took to make sure that Sophie was okay. She was his reason for everything. She was his reason to keep fighting. The next morning, Marcus started searching for work. He went from place to place, looking for any job that would hire him. But everywhere he went, he heard the same thing. They were not hiring. Or they wanted experience he didn't have. Or they wanted him to work for less money than he needed. A week passed. Marcus was living off the money from his night job at the warehouse. It was not enough. He was falling behind on bills. His landlord was starting to ask questions. Then, one day, Marcus saw a posting for a security guard job at the police station. The pay was better than his current night job. The hours were better too. Marcus applied immediately. He was honest on his application. He didn't hide his past. He explained that he was a single father and that he was looking for stable work. 3 days later, he got a call. The police department wanted to interview him. Marcus went to the interview wearing the only nice clothes he had. He spoke with Captain Sarah Martinez, a SWAT officer who was helping with the hiring process. Sarah was a woman in her early 40s, with dark hair, sharp eyes, and a presence that commanded respect. She listened to Marcus's story without interrupting. She looked at his applications and his references. "Why do you want to work here?" Sarah asked. "Because I need to provide for my daughter," Marcus said simply. "Because I need stable work. Because I want to be part of something that means something." Sarah looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then she smiled. "You're hired," she said. "We need people like you. People who are honest about who they are and what they need." Marcus started working at the police station the next week. His job was to patrol the building, to make sure everything was secure, to help people who came in. It was honest work, and it paid enough to keep them afloat. Marcus would often see Captain Sarah Martinez at the station. She was a legend among the police force. She had been with the SWAT team for 15 years. She had saved countless lives. She was tough, intelligent, and dedicated to her job. But she was also kind. She would sometimes stop and talk to Marcus. She would ask him about Sophie. She would tell him that she thought he was doing a good job as a father. One day, Sarah came to the station with her daughter, Emma. Emma was also 6 years old, the same age as Sophie. The two girls met in the hallway, and immediately, they became friends. They talked and laughed and played together while Sarah and Marcus watched. "They're the same age," Sarah said. "Sophie is a sweet girl." "Thank you," Marcus said. "Emma seems wonderful too." "She is," Sarah said. "I'm lucky to have her. It's not easy raising a child alone, but it's worth it every single day." Marcus felt understood in that moment. Sarah knew what it was like. She knew the struggle. She knew the fear and the hope all mixed together. From that day on, Sarah and Marcus would sometimes see each other at the police station. They would talk during their breaks. They would watch their daughters play together. Slowly, a friendship formed between them. And then, slowly, that friendship became something more. 6 months after Marcus started working at the police station, he and Sarah had become very close. They were not officially dating, but everyone at the station knew that there was something between them. Sarah would bring Emma to see Sophie. Marcus would sometimes join them for lunch. It was a tentative happiness, the kind of happiness that felt fragile because both of them had been hurt before. One day, Sarah came to Marcus with a request. She had to go on a SWAT operation, and she wanted to know if Marcus could pick up Emma from her mother's house and watch her for a few hours. Sophie's grandmother was also going to be there, so the girls could play together. "Of course," Marcus said. "Don't worry about anything. I'll take care of Emma." Sarah smiled at him with gratitude and something else. Something that looked like love. The operation was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. It was a routine surveillance mission, Sarah had said. Nothing dangerous. They were watching a warehouse where suspected criminal activity was taking place. It was standard procedure. Marcus picked up Emma from Sarah's mother's house in the morning. Emma was excited to spend the day with Sophie. The two girls played in Marcus's small apartment. They played with dolls. They watched cartoons. They ate lunch together. It was a peaceful, normal afternoon. At 3 o'clock, Marcus decided to take both girls to a nearby park. It was a beautiful day, and he wanted them to get some fresh air and exercise. Marcus packed a small bag with some snacks and water, and he took the girls to the park. The park was not very crowded. There were a few other families there, but mostly it was quiet and peaceful. Sophie and Emma played on the playground while Marcus sat on a bench nearby, watching them and thinking about Sarah. He wondered how her operation was going. He hoped everything was okay. At 4 o'clock, Marcus's phone rang. It was an unknown number. Marcus almost didn't answer, but something told him to pick up. "Mr. Marcus," a voice said. It was a police officer. "Yes, this is Marcus," he said, his heart suddenly racing. "Sir, there has been an incident at a warehouse on 5th and Main Street," the officer said. "Captain Sarah Martinez was injured during an operation. She is being taken to the hospital right now. We found your number in her phone as an emergency contact. Can you come to the hospital?" Marcus felt the world start to spin. "Is she okay? How badly is she hurt?" "I don't have all the details right now," the officer said. "But she is alive and conscious. Please come to the hospital as soon as you can." Marcus hung up the phone. His hands were shaking. He looked at Sophie and Emma playing on the playground, and he knew he had to make a decision quickly. He couldn't take them to the hospital. He needed someone to watch them. Marcus called his neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Chen. She agreed to come over and watch the girls immediately. Marcus explained that it was an emergency and that he would be back as soon as he could. Mrs. Chen could hear the panic in his voice, and she didn't ask questions. Marcus dropped the girls off at his apartment and drove to the hospital as fast as he could. His mind was racing with terrible thoughts. What had happened? How badly was Sarah hurt? Was she going to be okay? When Marcus arrived at the hospital, he ran to the emergency room. He told them he was looking for Sarah Martinez. A nurse directed him to a waiting area. There were several police officers there, including some members of Sarah's SWAT team. Marcus, one of the officers said. Sarah is in surgery right now. She was shot twice during the operation at the warehouse. Marcus felt his knees go weak. Shot twice. The words kept echoing in his mind. What happened? Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. The officer, whose name was Lieutenant Rodriguez, explained what had happened. During the surveillance operation, a suspect had been spotted at the warehouse. The SWAT team had moved in to apprehend him. The suspect had pulled a gun and fired at Sarah. The first bullet had hit her in the shoulder. But before she could take cover, the suspect had fired again. The second bullet had hit her in the abdomen. Sarah had fallen to the ground, and the other officers had rushed in and subdued the suspect. Backup and medical personnel had arrived quickly. Sarah had been conscious the entire time, and she had told them to call Marcus. She kept saying your name, Lieutenant Rodriguez said. Even after she was shot, even as she was bleeding, she was saying your name. She kept saying, tell Marcus to take care of Emma. Tell Marcus I love him. Marcus sat down in the chair and put his face in his hands. Sarah loved him. And she had been shot. Twice. And she might not make it. The thought was unbearable. The fear that gripped Marcus in that moment was unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was worse than the fear of losing his job. It was worse than the fear of not being able to pay rent. It was the fear of losing someone he loved, and that fear was consuming him from the inside out. He thought about Emma and how she would feel if she lost her mother. He thought about Sophie and how she would comfort Emma. He thought about his own life without Sarah in it, and the thought made him feel like he was drowning. Marcus started to pray. He was not a religious man, but in that moment, he prayed. He prayed to whatever force in the universe might be listening. He prayed that Sarah would survive. He promised that if Sarah lived, he would spend every single day for the rest of his life making sure that she knew how much he loved her. For 3 hours, Marcus sat in that waiting area. Police officers came and went. Other officers' families arrived. People talked and waited. But Marcus didn't hear any of it. He was lost in his own thoughts, in his own fear. A chaplain came and sat with Marcus. She was an older woman with kind eyes. She asked him if he wanted to talk about anything. Marcus told her about Sarah. He told her about how much he loved her. He told her about Emma and how smart and beautiful she was. He told her about Sophie and how the two girls had become best friends. He told her about his dreams of marrying Sarah and creating a family with her. He told her about all of it, and the chaplain listened without judgment, offering support and comfort with her presence. Finally, a surgeon came out and told him that Sarah was going to be okay. The bullets had missed all the vital organs. She would need a long recovery, and she would have some permanent scarring, but she was going to live. She was going to survive. Marcus broke down and cried right there in the hospital waiting area. He cried from relief. He cried from fear. He cried from love. A nurse took him to Sarah's room. She was in the recovery room, still sedated from the surgery. There were tubes and wires attached to her body. There was bandaging on her shoulder and her abdomen. She looked so small and vulnerable, lying in that hospital bed. Marcus took her hand and held it gently. He didn't let go for hours. He sat by her bedside and watched her breathe, grateful for every breath she took. When Sarah woke up, the first person she saw was Marcus. "You came," Sarah whispered. "Of course I came," Marcus said. "I love you, Sarah. I love you so much." "I love you too," Sarah said. "I knew you would come. I knew you would take care of Emma." "She's safe," Marcus said. "She's with Mrs. Chen at my apartment. Sophie is with her. They're okay." Sarah nodded, and then she closed her eyes again, comforted by the knowledge that her daughter was safe. The news about what had happened at the warehouse spread through the city quickly. A SWAT officer had been shot twice during an operation. But the story did not end there. Because there was another story, a story about what had happened right after Sarah was shot. When Sarah fell to the ground, bleeding from 2 bullet wounds, Marcus was not there. Marcus was in the park with the girls. But when the police arrived at the warehouse to apprehend the suspect and to help Sarah, what they found was something unexpected. There was a man at the warehouse. A single man in civilian clothes. This man had seen what happened. He had seen Sarah get shot. And he had done something that would change the course of his life forever. As the police officers rushed toward Sarah to help her, the suspect had tried to run. He was trying to escape. And this man, this civilian, had made a split-second decision. He had run at the suspect and tackled him to the ground, disarming him and preventing him from getting away. The man's name was not known at first. The police had to piece together who he was. And when they did, they discovered that he was not a police officer or a trained security professional. He was just a man. A single father who had been in the wrong place at the right time. No, that was not quite right. He had not been in the wrong place. He had been in the right place, because he had chosen to be there. You see, Marcus had not stayed home with the girls. After he had hung up the phone with the police officer, after he had called Mrs. Chen to watch Sophie and Emma, Marcus had driven to the hospital. But on the way to the hospital, he had remembered the address that the officer had given him. 5th and Main Street. The warehouse district. Marcus had made a detour. He had driven to the warehouse first, not knowing exactly what he would do when he got there. He had parked his car a few blocks away and walked toward the warehouse. He had stayed back, out of the way, not wanting to interfere with the police operation. And then he had heard the gunshots. 2 gunshots. And his heart had known immediately that something terrible had happened. Marcus had run toward the warehouse. He had seen Sarah fall to the ground. He had seen the suspect trying to run away. And in that moment, Marcus had done something that was not logical or rational or safe. He had run at the armed suspect and tackled him. The suspect had fired one more shot before Marcus reached him, but the shot had gone wild and hit no one. Marcus had disarmed him and had pinned him to the ground until the police officers could arrive and take over. It was only after everything was over, after the suspect was arrested and Sarah was being taken to the ambulance, that Marcus realized he had been shot. The 3rd bullet, the one that had gone wild when he tackled the suspect, had grazed his side. He was bleeding, but not badly. The police officers had wanted to take him to the hospital right away, but Marcus had insisted on going to see Sarah first. He had stood with her as she was being loaded into the ambulance. He had told her that everything was going to be okay. And only then had he allowed the paramedics to treat his own wound. Marcus's bullet wound was minor. It required stitches and bandaging, but no surgery. He was given antibiotics and told to keep it clean and dry. He was essentially fine. But the story of what he had done, the story of the single father who had tackled an armed criminal to save a SWAT officer's life, spread through the city like wildfire. The media picked it up. The news outlets ran with it. Within hours, Marcus was famous. He was a hero. When Marcus finally returned to his apartment that night, after spending hours at the hospital with Sarah, he found Mrs. Chen sitting on his couch with Sophie and Emma. Both girls were asleep, curled up next to each other. The news is everywhere, Mrs. Chen said, showing him her phone. There was a picture of Marcus, his shirt torn and bloodied, being escorted away from the warehouse by paramedics. The headline read, "Single Dad Hero Saves SWAT Officer's Life." Marcus did not feel like a hero. He felt exhausted and scared and overwhelmed. But he also felt something else. He felt purposeful. He felt like maybe, just maybe, his life had direction now. The next morning, reporters started coming to his apartment. They wanted to interview him. They wanted to know how he had felt in that moment. They wanted to know his story. Marcus gave them interviews because he thought it was important that people understand the truth. He was not a trained action hero. He was just a man who had been in love with a woman and who had been willing to do anything to protect her. The police department held a press conference and officially announced that Marcus would be receiving a Medal of Valor. The mayor wanted to give him a key to the city. Local businesses wanted to give him free meals for the rest of his life. It was overwhelming. But the most important thing was that Sarah survived. Sarah recovered. And when she was finally released from the hospital after 2 weeks, Marcus was there to pick her up. He brought Emma with him. When Sarah saw Emma, she cried. When she saw Marcus, she cried even harder. "You saved my life," Sarah said to Marcus. "You gave me a reason to save your life," Marcus said. "I love you, Sarah." "I love you too," Sarah said. At that moment, standing in the hospital parking lot with Sarah on one side of him and Emma and Sophie on the other side, Marcus understood something. He understood that life was not just about surviving. It was about the people you loved and the things you were willing to do for them. It was about becoming the person you needed to be for the people who needed you. Sarah took 3 months off work to recover. During those 3 months, she spent a lot of time with Marcus and Sophie. Her daughter Emma was thriving with them. Slowly, Marcus's apartment started to feel like home to all of them. Sarah's things mixed with Marcus's things. Emma's toys mixed with Sophie's toys. It was not perfect, but it was real and true and full of love. One day, Marcus asked Sarah to marry him. It was not a fancy proposal. They were sitting on the small porch of his apartment, drinking coffee and watching the girls play in the courtyard below. Marcus simply took Sarah's hand and asked her if she would spend the rest of her life with him. "Yes," Sarah said immediately. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony with close family and friends. Sophie was the flower girl. Emma was the ring bearer. The girls were so happy that they could barely contain themselves. When Marcus and Sarah exchanged their vows, both of them cried. They were tears of joy and tears of relief, tears that said, "We made it, and we survived, and we found each other." After the wedding, Marcus and Sarah bought a small house together. It was not a big house, but it was theirs. They worked together to make it a home. Marcus fixed things around the house, just like he always had, but now he had Sarah helping him. The girls had their own rooms. There was a backyard where they could play. Marcus continued to work at the police station. Sarah returned to active duty with the SWAT team. They managed to balance their work and their family life, which was not always easy, but they made it work because they loved each other and they were committed to making it work. The story of Marcus, the single father who had tackled an armed criminal to save a SWAT officer's life, had become famous. There were news articles written about him. There was even talk of making a movie about it. But Marcus never let the fame go to his head. He remained humble and grounded. He remained the man who was devoted to his family and to doing the right thing. Years passed. Sophie and Emma grew older. Sophie became more interested in science and mathematics. Emma, inspired by her mother, wanted to become a police officer. Marcus supported both of them in their dreams. He was there at all of their school events. He helped them with their homework. He was present and engaged and loving. One day, when Emma was in high school, she was assigned a project to write about someone she admired. Emma chose her father, Marcus. She wrote about how he had been a single father struggling to make ends meet. She wrote about how he had found love again with her mother. She wrote about how he had risked his own life to save her mother's life. But most importantly, she wrote about how her father had taught her what it meant to be brave. Not brave in the way that police officers are brave, she wrote, although her mother was certainly brave in that way. But brave in the way that ordinary people are brave. Brave enough to keep trying when things are hard. Brave enough to love someone with your whole heart. Brave enough to do the right thing even when it is scary. When Marcus read Emma's essay, he felt tears come to his eyes. He realized that being a hero was not about the moment when he had tackled the suspect. Being a hero was about all the moments that came before and after. It was about being a good father. It was about working hard. It was about loving deeply. It was about never giving up. The wound from the bullet that had grazed Marcus's side left a scar. It was a small scar, barely noticeable, but it was there. Sometimes people would ask Marcus about it, and he would tell them the story. The story of the day that changed his life. The day that Sarah was shot twice. The day that Marcus learned what it meant to be brave. But the real scars, the ones that mattered, were not on his body. They were on his heart. They were the scars of struggle and hardship and fear. And those scars had made him stronger. They had made him better. They had made him the man that Sarah loved and that Sophie and Emma admired. Years later, when Marcus was older, when his daughters were grown and had lives of their own, he would sometimes think back to that day at the warehouse. He would remember how scared he had been. He would remember how he had not thought about his own safety. He would remember how all he could think about was Sarah and how he could not bear to lose her. And he would realize that that was the moment when his life had truly begun. Before that day, he had been surviving. After that day, he was living. The end.